Hello everybody and welcome along to this video, which is Mr. Johnson Teaches Paper 1 Section A Question 4, part of my English language revision series of videos that you'll find across this playlist. They're talking you through the two English language papers that you sit with AQA, and as it says at the bottom there, you'll definitely need to be ready to pause this video to make your own notes. That's something that you can look back on then when you've finished and you've got your revision and you want to go back over ideas. And above all, as I'll say at the end of this video, it's really important as a next step that you're actually practicing these questions against the clock. That is the best way that you can prepare yourself for English language. So let's get going then and start having a look. And first things first, what does paper 1 actually look like? Well, physically, that's what it looks like on the outside, as you can see on the right hand side of the screen there. But this is the paper where you start off with one source, and it's a fiction source. So this is, like as it says there, creative reading, sometimes known maybe as stories if you want to put it simply, and you're given generally around a page or just over a page extract to read. The first 15 minutes of this paper are encouraged to be spent reading, and also I always say to my groups, highlighting anything which leaps out at you. You can highlight the extract that you're given because that is not sent off to the exam board, and you can also label it as well. Label anything you spot on there. And then once you've done that, your next bit is the yellow box, which is section A of the paper, and section A comprises 4 questions, as you can see there. And then you move on to section B, which is your writing task. And those two sections are worth the same amount of marks, and you're encouraged to spend about 45 minutes on each. So of course, during this video, we're going to be looking at question 4, which is a really important question. It's 20 marks out of the 80 on the paper, so already it's 25%. And if you consider actually that if you double up the GCSEs, essentially this is about 12.5% of your entire GCSE is given over to how you perform on this question. That's not to put pressure on you, but that's just to make you realise the importance of it, and particularly timings as well. Too many students get their timings wrong and don't leave themselves long enough to have a go at question 4. But let's have a look then at question 4. So it might look something like this. Focus your part of the answer on the second part of the source. That's the first thing I'd say here. Generally speaking, it's always about the second part of the source because question 2 focuses you on the beginning, as does question 1. Question 3 is a structure, and therefore you look at the whole source. This bit, they normally just get you to look at the end. And you get a statement, something like, as it says there, a student having read this extract said, "The collector sounds like a dangerous character and a real threat to the children. The writer leaves us in no doubt that they are at risk." Some sort of made-up quote from a student is normally put there, which comprises of 2 or 3 bits, and we'll look at those in a moment. And then it asks this, to what extent do you agree? So this is called evaluating, or an evaluation question, where you are asked to consider your own viewpoints, your own ideas linked to that statement. So the statement is a starting point to try and get you almost discussing what you think about the extract. So you do need to form some opinions and some of your own ideas. There are some bullet points beneath it as well, which you can use to help guide your answer. But the other thing I'll point out there, as I've said already, it's a 20-mark question. We always suggest here that you spend 20 minutes on this one. If you've done your other timings well enough, you should leave yourself 20 minutes. It's why it's so important to be really strict on the earlier questions. Because yes, you might want to spend 15 minutes on question 2 because you're getting into it. But then that means you've only got 15 minutes to try and gain 20 marks. And you're very unlikely to be able to do that. So let's move on then. Now this is the first part of the video where I really start giving you some advice of how I would approach this question. If your English teacher has told you something different, then by all means go with what they've said. But this is the advice I always give to my classes, which is break the student statement down into parts. And those parts can form part of your answer, like almost a structure for your answer. So if I look at that statement then, the bit in inverted commas where it says, the collector sounds like a dangerous character and a real threat to the children. That's my idea number 1. Do I agree? I think I know you haven't read this extract and that doesn't help you here, but let's just go with it and say, yeah, you know what, I think he does sound dangerous because earlier they said this about him or this, and you'd find some evidence to back it up. But then I've also, in my second bullet point there, I said he does sound like a threat, but it seems a bit too late because actually he has already, and you could include another detail from it. But again, I know that relies on you reading it. Then I'd look at the second part of that after the full stop, and we've got this. The writer leaves us in no doubt that they are at risk. So the children are at risk. And I put there again, I agree, because earlier we saw how, so agreeing with the statement is generally a good way to go. It's because the statement they make up generally will always have something true about it. Therefore, if it's true, you can agree with it and offer some evidence, some quotes to back that up. And then I always encourage my classes to try and look at almost an alternative or offering their own idea. So, okay, yes, they do sound at risk, but maybe again, for some of them it's too late. They're not even at risk anymore because it actually sounds like some of them have died. Offering an idea like that is really good because it shows your own independent thinking. So let's move on and look at how would I structure my answer then. So okay, I've highlighted those keywords, or I've picked apart the statement a little bit on my exam paper. I've labelled my thoughts next to it because you can do that. Anything that you write there isn't going to necessarily be marked, but you can actually plan a bit like what I've done and draw arrows off of your page. But then moving down, what I would say is, how do I structure my answer? Well, in my earlier videos, if you've watched any of those, I've always used a 1, 2, 3 method. I adapt it slightly here and call it a 1, 2, 3, 4 method. And what does that look like? Well, start off by looking at the statement. Do you agree or think something about the statement like we just did a minute ago? So you start off by agreeing or offering an idea. Next up, you then say, and the writer has done this by using, it could be a simile or some imagery or whatever it may be. Thirdly, you then offer a bit of evidence which backs up that. So if you've said a simile, you need to maybe put a quote for the simile. If you've said they've used really twisted and horrible adjectives, then you want to quote those really twisted and horrible adjectives. And then you move on to the effect. So, okay, what does this do? What feeling does it create or mood does it create? Now, I'm going to try and model that a little bit for you. Again, this may not make perfect sense because you won't have fully read the extract that I've used to base this on, but I've labelled the numbers there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that links to the yellow box there. So, statement. I agree that he sounds dangerous, and he also sounds quite twisted. Number 2, here's my method, because the writer focused our attention on the details of how the collector plays with his toys. The method I have used there is a structural method, focused our attention on. Really important point to say here. This question number 4, you can talk about language or structure, or both. Question 2, you can only talk about language. Question 3, you can only focus on structure. But question 4, you can use either. And honestly, I think sometimes it's actually easier to use structural terminology like focused our attention on. So in this one, I've put he focuses our attention on those details. And I've put my quotes there, which is my number 3. Then number 4, then looking at the effect, this instantly creates an unsettling feeling for us and makes us wonder how many children have been harmed by him. Using words such as prodding, it suggests that, and at that point I'd go on to do what I call a little bit of language analysis. So looking at almost what is the effect of him prodding these children? I mean, how does that make us feel? It should make us feel really uncomfortable and make us maybe dislike the collector. And those two things which I've just said then are what I could put as my effect, what the writer is trying to achieve and what the writer is trying to do. And it really is that. In the time I've got, I'd like to think I might be able to manage 3 paragraphs, but absolutely 2 at a minimum. It's not always about how much you write, but it is about the detail that you go into. So that's what I'd be looking at there. 2, but ideally maybe 3 paragraphs following that 1, 2, 3, 4 method, like I've tried to demonstrate below, except I didn't finish that answer because I ran out of room on my slide. To summarise then with question 4, so as I've put there, use the statement to guide your answer. Use it to almost come up with your own ideas. Then, as it says there, try and offer your own idea with it. That certainly is how to push your answer into those higher levels. So if they say he sounds dangerous, say, yeah, I agree he sounds dangerous. I think he also sounds quite something, and try and offer your own opinion if you can. Leave lots of time to do this question is one of my absolute top tips. Too many students are trying to gain themselves 20 marks in 12 minutes, and it just won't work. You've really got to be on it with your timings of the earlier questions. And as I put at the bottom there, try your best to follow the 1, 2, 3, 4 method. If you deviate slightly or if it goes slightly wrong, that's fine. But on the right hand side there, I've got a little screenshot of part of the mark scheme for a paper. And actually my 1, 2, 3, 4 relate to those 4 bullet points just in reverse order. So my number 1 is at the bottom there. It just shows you, and they're in a slightly jumbled order, that if you're able to follow those skills, you are gaining yourself marks, because the examiners or your teachers, if that's who's marking your paper, have to give credit where it's due. It's just up to how much detail you're able to go into, whether you're able to show some understanding of the writer's methods, or if you show a clear, or in this case, show a perceptive understanding. So anyway, I hope you found that useful. Again, go back and re-watch if you find that you need to try and pick up some more tips or advice. There are many other videos on this channel, both literature and language, that you might might find useful. If you find these videos really useful, then why not considering subscribing? It'd be a really great thing to see you do that, and I'm very grateful if you do. And above all, when it comes to any exams that you have to sit, I wish you the very best of luck. Go off and practice with past papers and get somebody to mark it for you. That's the way to improve. So, for now, it's me saying goodbye and good luck in your future exams.